Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Yash. I'm a founding partner at Arka Venture Labs, and I'm a partner at BGV. And today I'm joined by our guest, Amar Goel. We're going to talk about the art and science of building a global enterprise startup. And Amar is one of the few people in the US India ecosystem that has successfully done this from India. A quick intro about Amar. Amar's a serial entrepreneur. He founded Pubmatic in 2006, serving as the company's first CEO. Currently, as Chief Innovation Officer, founder, and chairman, Amar runs Pubmatic's marketplace group, where he focuses on data and algorithmic product innovation, machine learning, and marketplace quality. In addition to Pubmatic, Amar also founded several other companies, including Combly Media, the leading independent advertising technology platform in the APAC region. As a 19-year-old student at Harvard, Amar co-founded chipshot.com. Over 5 years, he grew this business to close to $30 million in annual sales, making chipshot.com the fastest growing e-commerce website at that time. Amar has previously led sales for digital advertising business at Microsoft, worked at McKinsey and Company and Netscape, and in a variety of consulting and engineering roles. Holds a master's degree in computer science and bachelor's degree in economics from Harvard. And recently, he started a new company to go through the journey all over again. Before we dive into Amar's journey, a quick intro about myself and Arka for folks in the audience who don't know us yet. Arka Venture Labs is an early stage cross-border accelerator fund, enabling Indian B2B startups who are building from India to scale up globally. We do this with capital, with mentorship, and in-depth access to both Silicon Valley and Indian startup ecosystem. It's one of the first accelerated fund with dedicated focus to this India-US cross-border enterprise ecosystem. It was backed by three early-stage VC firms, Bloom, BGV, and Emergent. Our goal at Arka is to help the next generation of Indian founders who are building fast-scaling product companies from India and help them scale up and dominate the global enterprise markets. On this note, I wanted to turn it over and introduce you to Amar. Amar, maybe we start off with this question. Since everyone may not know your journey, it would be very helpful to start by telling the audience about Pubmatic, your early career, and also about how you ended up in the startup world.
Great. Well, first of all, I'd say thanks for having me, and happy to be here. And unfortunately, I can't see the viewers, but I hope to interact with you and hopefully get something out of this. Maybe I'll start with just a couple sentences on Pubmatic, just to give people some who don't know about us and probably wouldn't know about us. So Pubmatic, we created this in digital advertising, this platform called the supply side platform. So it's purpose-built software infrastructure for digital advertising to help publishers sell their advertising programmatically. So we sort of say all advertising is going digital and all digital is going programmatic, which means effectively it's just being traded, via APIs. And we went public last year, which has been really exciting and very fortunate to have done that. This year, the company will do, well over 200 million in revenue, 70, 80 million in EBITDA. And, last couple of quarters, we've been growing around 50%. So it's been pretty exciting. That's a little bit about us. And I'm based in the Bay Area. So I actually grew up in Silicon Valley, and then I moved to India and lived there for about 10 years when I started Pubmatic and Combly, as Yash was mentioning. So I had a friend who told me, "Oh, how do you start all these companies?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And then when he found out I grew up in Silicon Valley, he said, "Oh, I think it's in the water." He's like, "It didn't just happen accidentally." So, look, when I grew up reading the newspaper, it was always about, it wasn't what it was today. It wasn't like that back then. It wasn't like every day somebody was raising a $500 million round from Tiger. But at the same point, it was part of the counterculture of tech and sort of the innovation and kind of creating new things and a sense that, you were kind of, there was some aspect of trying to change the world a little bit was here, and that was kind of cool. I was always starting silly businesses as a kid, and kind of reading, like I said, about the Valley. I started to learn to code in high school, and it kind of went from there. I mean, I definitely wasn't crazed by coding back then, but then in college and high school, it just kind of really took off for me, and I got really into it. Yeah, and then I got started, like I said, in the startup world. I started this company, ChipShot, when I was in college. It was one of the early e-commerce companies. Started in 1995, so it was super early, if you will. At ChipShot, I kind of ran it out of my college dorm room for a couple of years. Harvard actually changed a rule to allow students to start businesses in their dorm rooms. They used to have a rule prohibiting you from using university resources. So it's because of me that Facebook exists. Yeah, right. But anyway, so yeah, the dean actually mentioned it when he changed the rule that, Amar started this business. And I thought, we don't want to prevent students from starting companies. So it's kind of funny. But anyways, then I graduated from college, and I was building this business, and we raised money from venture money from Sequoia and whatnot. And we got close to going public, and then, kind of tanked in 2000 as the NASDAQ kind of crashed and burned, left a lot of scar tissue. But, I think one of the things I learned in that process, we were getting ready to buy a bigger company. And I realized I didn't really know how to manage like a kind of a more, it was just a national company. It was just going to be across both coasts in the US. So then I decided to kind of go back to McKinsey and go to McKinsey and then Microsoft. And so I really wanted to go to larger companies, be involved in larger businesses, understand how they work. I felt like I learned the skills to run a 10,000 person company. I feel like I would be comfortable doing that, and it wasn't like, it felt like a fish out of water. And so I had the kind of mental models and frameworks to be able to do that, So anyways, that's kind of what got me to then Pubmatic, where I wanted to get back to building something new.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing that. And actually, today, when you look at what's flowing in the waters and in all the Indian innovation hubs, it's entrepreneurship. Be it Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai or Mumbai, Delhi. All of those ecosystems are kind of developing, and you see some amazing founders building companies from there. So let's kind of get into the Pubmatic journey a little bit. What was the journey like at Pubmatic, and what are some of the key takeaways that the portfolio companies that are listening today, what should they keep in mind when building a global B2B startup?
Yeah, and so one of the questions I guess I would have is, like, when you say global, is that really code for the US? You know what I mean? In the sense of, outside of India, if you will. And, the US is like one of the biggest markets, or it's the biggest market. So, I really think it comes down to, you have to understand your core market. I hear companies in India talk all the time about, we're going to build in the Indian market, and then we're going to, go to the US after that. And I guess on an unkind day, I would say, I think that's nonsense. If I'm being kind, I would say, well, that's probably not. That's a pretty high risk approach, just because the Indian market is a different market, the level of sophistication of customers, the needs of customers, just to give you like a super simple, basic example. If you're building an app in India, iOS is irrelevant. You're just going to build for Android, but you get to the US, you get to Western Europe, most apps are built iOS first. That's kind of where, a lot of consumers are. That's certainly where, a lot of working professionals are. So again, if you're going for the enterprise sector, you would build iOS first. And so, I think that's like a very simple example, but it just is like a very different, approach that you would take. And so you got to really understand how that customer thinks and what their buying journey is, and what other competitive, what other products they're looking at, et cetera. So I feel like that, is a big thing that I see a lot of startups coming out of India, who don't focus on that, ends up having a really difficult road.
So that was actually one of our first realizations, when we were kind of, building Arka, was that, very critical component for some of the, cross-border companies, purely in this India-US cross-border ecosystem, it's about connecting them to where the customers are, and really, avoiding the need to kind of innovate you're already innovating thousands of miles away from your customers, but you still need to be closer to them, talking to them on a daily basis. And how can we facilitate that? How can we facilitate those introductions and that engagement with the mentors here? So that was how Arka got started. So, you bring up a very good point over there. So maybe, if you were to start up, let's say, Pubmatic today, what would you do differently compared to when you started Pubmatic? What's some of the lessons that you take out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably two big things. I would say, one is kind of the key tenets of the lean startup kind of approach. And then I think, around employee experience. And so I can, I think that matters a lot more, and how, what the team is looking for. So I can dig into both of those a little bit. I think on the lean startup, I mean, there are pros and cons to lean startup. I think it, can prevent you from, if you take like Tesla and say, oh, take a lean startup approach, you just would never have built the company, to kind of invest the time and energy to actually get to, even a kind of first car and get to market. But that being said, I mean, I think a lot of, enterprise software companies can leverage a lot of learnings from lean startup, right? You don't need to build the product. You can start with mock-ups, right? You can do tons of user interviews, or you focus really on keeping the team small till you get to kind of, product market fit. So, I mean, I think those are like a lot of learnings that people have taken away. And I frankly think a lot of startups kind of hear those words, they start out believing in them, and then they like ignore it when they get into, their actual journey, about listening to the customer, like really reflecting back on like what they're saying, not having any ego about what you're doing. I mean, I used to, when I was younger, kind of very, hopefully I'm not too old now, but I'm older a little bit. I used to be like, oh, pivot, that means you failed. So then you're trying something new. So I sort of had like, I don't want to say I pivoted. Now, honestly, I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, pivoting's fine. Like, all I care about is building something that, creates value for our customers, and hopefully build something that is a useful product and a valuable company. So we have to pivot 5 times to get there. I'm fine. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Lots of super successful companies are pivots. Slack's a pivot, Pinterest is a pivot. Lots of companies are pivots. So I think that's kind of one thing, using those tenets of the lean startup methodology and really internalizing those. And then I think the second thing is, I think your teammates, your employees, their experience matters more. They want a more inclusive, responsible place. They're more vocal about what the company stands for, kind of social attitudes in the company. Like I was mentioning, I'm just starting a new company now, and I actually wanted, diversity on the cap table, from day one. And so that was something I was really actively hunting out, how to get more, diversity from women, LGBTQ, Black, Hispanic, which candidly is not something I've focused on, 15 years ago when starting Pubmatic. I think employees care about that more. So I think those are two things that are pretty different. And I spend more time on the employee experience today than I used to.
Absolutely. And kind of, as I say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, once you have a good culture and a very inclusive, responsible culture, as you say, it leads to a very cohesive team that can do wonders, so definitely very, very important. So, running a startup is hard, right? So, and when you add the cross-border angle to this, it just becomes doubly hard. So how does one manage time as a founder, and especially teams on different sides of the planet, 12, 11 and a half hours of time difference? How do you even make this as a strategic advantage? Can you talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's right. I mean, I think um, the time difference, is a tax. I don't know about making it a strategic advantage. I mean, I think it is a tax, and it takes a toll, and you got to manage it. I think a lot is about managing yourself emotionally. When I would wake up in the morning, I had two startups. I had Pubmatic and I had Gomli. So I would, kind of work in the day at Gomli. Then I would, at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I would start working on Pubmatic, and I work till midnight or 1 a.m. on that. But like, I wake up in the morning and, there's all these emails that have come in from the other part of the world. Right. And so, uh, you always are like, some employees resigning, you're losing some deal, there's always something going wrong somewhere in the world. And the bigger your business, the more there's lots of stuff going great too, but there's lots of stuff going wrong everywhere, and the faster you're growing, if you're not growing, you're stressed out. If you're growing super fast, you're stressed out because stuff's breaking left and right. So, it's just part of the journey. And, you can wake up every morning, you can read some email about we lost this deal or we lost this employee, and then you can kind of be ticked off, right every day, right in the morning. You can wake up at 7, start scanning your email and choose to be ticked off. And so, I think happiness it's a choice. It's up to you, and so I think you got to really kind of keep an even keel. And just kind of realize like, hey, it's part of the journey. And, all of the ups and downs is what startups are about. And you got to manage that so that you're not, kind of angry all the time, if you will, or often getting angry and ruining your day. And, that obviously impacts your team that's next to you as well. So that being said, I do think like being global, certainly being cross-border, you get more perspective in your company. You start thinking internationally, like early on. You get more diversity in your company. You have access to a lot of talent. There are a lot of cost advantages to having, engineering in India, and then, selling to the rest of the world. I mean, that is a huge part of, I think, some of the benefits that, Indian, global SaaS companies can have as they build their companies and lets you hire more folks to be able to innovate faster. I mean, that was certainly, a key part of, I think, what's led to Pubmatic's success as well. So, you're more open to like having a global team, and there's a lot of talent out there. So I think there's some real benefits that come with it too.
Absolutely. And sometimes kind of I joke like, part of my job is being a coach, and another 50% of my job is being a therapist, and one of the reasons why when we were designing Arka, we said, okay, you got to put more wood behind fewer arrows, not do spray and pray investing, but really focus on about 10 companies every year and give it all, because, helping the founders through this journey is very, very important, as they make the transition, and help them manage this emotional challenge of kind of dealing with teams across the border, right, both sides of the border.
Yeah, definitely.
So and on the cost advantages side, I mean, this often doesn't get talked about, but India is probably home to the world's largest English speaking computer literate population in the world. And this is a strategic advantage, not just you can do development, but also sales ops,
inside sales, customer success,
marketing,
a lot of stuff.
Data ops also, so this kind of gives it all of them can be co-located, right? So that's a really big strategic advantage. Yeah, so let's talk about growth. Growth's very different at various stages of the company. Would be interesting to know about this $0 to $1 million ARR, right? The really early stage. How did you navigate those early stages? How did you get that go-to-market repeatability? What should some of our founders do and don't do? Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I really think founders need to be involved very deeply in early selling. If you're kind of a product engineer, and you're just like, oh, I built the product, now I'm going to hire a salesperson to sell it. I mean, I don't think that's a great way to approach it. I really think you got to be you got to go out there and sell the product early on and get that feedback from the customers. I think, the first 100 customers you talk to, there's just so much feedback you get and features you hear from them. And, you kind of hear something 3 times and you're like, hey, maybe we should be building this, or like, people keep saying this, and I think if you have a salesperson, they're not focused on trying to imbibe that and how to adjust the product. They're like, I'm being measured on, I got a quota, I got to hit my number. If this guy doesn't want it, forget him. I got to move on to the next candidate. That's just, they have a different skill set than you. They're a salesperson, you're the founder. And so, you really need to kind of do that early selling. And I think that's super important to kind of also figure out that GTM repeatability, because I think as you do it more and more, you get a sense of like, hey, this is the messaging that's working. This is the pitch that's working. This is this is what's resonating with customers. This is the pricing that I think the model could work. And so, you got to be in the market. Now, look, obviously it's changing with Zoom now. So you don't have to be physically in the market on every call, but you need to be on the calls. You need to do sales calls. But I also think there's a lot of value in being in the market, right? When you can get to know some customers well, you go out to lunch with them, a coffee, dinner, whatever. And, they can be kind of a sounding board for you when you're trying to get some feedback about something or whatnot. At Pubmatic, well, we built our alpha and we went to go live with our first customer, and basically the product kind of fell over, like it couldn't scale. We'd written the initial kind of ad serving engine in Java, and that was a big mistake. And so then I didn't do it, but our engineering team, 2 people at the time, basically stayed up for 2 weeks and rewrote it in C++. And, then when we went to market a few months later, we were really lucky. Like, we had a lot of customers sign up. When we kind of did our announcement, we launched at a TechCrunch conference. If I remember correctly, we had like 5,000 publishers sign up in the first like 24 hours. Wow. I wouldn't say the product worked perfectly, but they were starting to kind of use it. So we had a lot of people signing up, but, we launched it as a free model and freemium kind of product, and not freemium. We didn't have any paid model. It was just free. And investors were really skeptical that it was a new category that we launched, and investors were skeptical. Oh, they're using it for free. They're not going to pay you. But, we weren't that worried about that. I mean, customers were telling us, that they would be happy to pay us. Like, they were saying, oh, I'm getting value. We generate more revenue for the customer. So when we were kind of trialing out, hey, we're going to charge you 15%, they were like, yeah, that's fine. If you're making me 30% or 80% more revenue, what do I care? So we weren't too worried about that, but we were really, more focused on how do we attract bigger customers. We kind of started out with all these small SMB type blogger customers, and we really needed to go in much more into larger publishing markets. So that was kind of our big focus, in getting a pitch and a go-to-market approach in terms of onboarding and whatnot, that could attract those bigger customers. So that was the part that we really had to kind of nail down, and frankly, I would say it took us a while to kind of get there.
Got it. And maybe a comment a little bit about team building, especially when you have to, you hired some really accomplished people, and what are some of the do's and don'ts over there when it comes to hiring these folks and managing them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess what I'm going to say is maybe not like rocket science, but you got to hire a great team. I mean, I've seen people say, oh yeah, this idea is so great. The team doesn't, matter as much, or it's okay if we don't have a strong person. I mean, you got to assume the competition's coming, and, the market keeps moving fast. And so you got to get great people. You got to hire people who you almost kind of say to yourself, like, this person's amazing. I can't believe that they joined my crappy little company. I mean, I think you really want to get people who are better, at least at your leadership team level. You want to get people who know more about their area than you do, for sure. I mean, you don't want to be like, oh, I'm a product person, so I don't need to hire a strong person in product, or I know more than about marketing than my marketing person. You really want to get somebody who you feel like you're learning from. And that's obviously hard at first, trying to convince people, but you just kind of keep chipping away. You also want to find people who can scale you up at least a few levels. You don't want to get somebody who's just good for now, but can't take you to that next stage. Let's say you're at 1 million in ARR. I think you want to get somebody who you're like, hey, I really feel like this person can take us to 20 million in ARR, 15 million at least. I wouldn't go get the CRO of Twilio, when you're at 1 million in ARR, because that person, is a different kind of executive. Their motivations for joining, how they think about businesses is, I don't know what Twilio's at, but it's probably at 1 billion in ARR. I mean, that's just a different kind of thing. They're too far removed from the realities that you're facing at 0 or 1 or 2 million in ARR to kind of get to 10, and getting in the trenches and what's involved, right? And so you want somebody who can see you for where you are today, but then help you, get to kind of, like I said, where you want to be, a year or two out. And obviously you hope they scale with you, and you want to encourage them and give them all the coaching and learning they need to scale. Some people do great in that, and, other people unfortunately don't make it, but that's fine. You help them find something else and continue to build their career.
Got it. Maybe we switch towards kind of, the other half of the story, which is, just Pubmatic going public, and just want to get your thoughts on, how was this transition from a founder running a private company to being a public company and being a chairman of a public company? So how was the transition?
Yeah, I mean, I get this question a lot, and I really think it hasn't been that much of a big deal. There's definitely a lot. Everyone kind of makes it seem like you were on Earth and now you're on Mars, and I just don't see it that way. I think there's definitely a lot more paperwork and governance, around, you have board committees, and, a lot more things need to be approved. And the process of going public is intense, and, from investor presentations to the S1 and setting up a lot of different governance structures, processes, et cetera. So, I mean, that's maybe a little bit painful, but I think, being on the other side now, I think it's not so different now. I think a lot of it comes down to how well run of a company you are. I like to think we're a pretty well-run company, and a lot of that kudos goes to my brother, who's a CEO, and the way he operates, the business. But we put a lot of energy into not expressly wanting to change, how we operate. So we actually made all the employees insiders, so they are all subject to the trading windows, so they can only trade for a few weeks a quarter. But we wanted to keep sharing, a lot of confidential information with employees on a daily basis. We didn't want to change the way we operate. Like, we went public to help our business be better, not, the business to help going public or something like that. And so that's, how we've tried to approach it.
Got it. And maybe on on this topic, you brought up briefly about the board. Different founders have different styles of, working with their board. Some are very, very involved, and some don't want to share a lot of information. So it's a spectrum, and also being a board member also involves being aware of the fiduciary duties of you as not just a founder and a shareholder, but also as a board member, right? So how any tips to some of our founders on being a best board member, and also to some of the investors who are getting on the cap tables?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. It's a complicated question, because I think it changes a lot, over time. I mean, why do boards exist? I mean, boards technically are there for governance, of the company, right? So governance means making sure that the company is running according to kind of norms, following the terms of, its charter, and that, the appropriate things are being discussed and approved, like compensation or, strategy. The board isn't really there technically to um, they're not there to run the company by any stretch. They're not there really to set the strategy of the company. I mean, that really should be left to the CEO, and the management team. If the board doesn't feel that the CEO can do a good job and run the company, then the board should replace the CEO. I mean, that would sort of be the ideal, or not that replacing the CEO is the ideal situation, but that's sort of how the board construct should be set up. Now, I think the reality is a lot of people come to the board with their own agendas, right? Investors are trying to protect their investment. They want to grow their investment, but they're trying to protect as well. Founders want to protect, their company, their control. So, I mean, I think that you end up with a lot of these differing personalities. And I think you have to sort of, as a founder, you've got to kind of understand, figure out what's your operating style that works for you. What do you care about? What do you want to get out of your board members? One of the things I've, tried to do over time is see each of the board members as an advisor, and really think about what is the specific expertise that they bring. What is the thing that they're good at? Or there could be a couple of things that they're really good at, and, lean on them, for that. Right. I think in the early days, your investors, your board members, who are often investors, have checkbooks too. So that can kind of skew things because, you're not sure if you should be totally open with them about everything because they might be leading your next round. And I think, that's actual real tension that's there. I think once you get profitable or you kind of outgrow your investors' ability to kind of continue to invest at scale in your company, then I think your interests become very aligned. Mm-hmm. And, you can, I think, be comfortable being, because you're aligned, you can be fully candid with each other, and I think that there's some, I think that's something that's nice,
Got it. Now let's kind of shift topic and focus on kind of the India-US cross-border story, and we've seen several companies kind of grow and become iconic companies from here in the Valley, and it has a particular set of magic to it. So, could you talk a little bit about the Silicon Valley, and how we can replicate the success of the Valley in multiple parts of the world, and especially in the post-COVID world, where the opportunity is to kind of operate in a very distributed way. Talk a bit about how could we replicate the magic of Silicon Valley everywhere.
Well, I think there's some good and there's some bad about that. I mean, I think at its core, Silicon Valley is kind of a state of mind. I mean, it's an ethos to kind of keep innovating and trying things and being okay with failing. I mean, at least that's how it started out. I do fear that it's becoming a little bit about the money now, but that's kind of where it started. And I think that ethos is becoming more distributed around the world, right? It's in India, it's in China, it's in Israel, it's in Africa. And more startups hubs are being created around the world. And so, I think that Silicon Valley is going to continue to grow massively, but, other centers are growing significantly as well. I mean, I guess if you were to look at, Silicon Valley has lost share of, whatever metric you want to use, right? Number of startups, venture capital raise, et cetera. That being said, it still is the largest, ecosystem by far, maybe like ex-China, to be fair. But I think that it's, for it to do well doesn't mean others are not doing well. I think there's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats here as, tech is changing, the global economy.
Right, and maybe we end with this. It's we've seen a successful story with Pubmatic, creating a global enterprise startup, and there are firms like Arka, which is coming up and providing that platform for entrepreneurs who are building from India and into the global markets. How could we accelerate this trend of Indian founders, riding the wave of global enterprise innovation and building category leaders and helping them scale up, into the global markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think things like Arka are, huge. I mean, one of the things I kind of probably didn't address in my last question is like, obviously Silicon Valley, like I said, is state of mind, but I think there's a lot more underneath that, right? I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of, there's the attitude part, but there's also, a network of people, right? Skill sets around engineering, product, design, go to market. There's a whole set of angel investors, accelerators, seed investors. So, I mean, you need a venture economy, I think, out there to help fund and, kind of power some of this innovation. So, I mean, that is something that I see happening at a very, rapid pace in India currently. I mean, I hope it's not like overheated like it got maybe 5 or 6 years ago when the e-commerce boom was happening and Flipkart and Snapdeal were kind of duking it out. But like, I mean, I think that there's, a real transformation kind of happening. And so I think that, that looks to be here to stay. And I think it's very, it's very powerful. And I think that, lots of people are willing to become part of that ecosystem, join startups and whatnot that they didn't before. I think the cross-border piece is still, is powerful. It's difficult, and so I think like I don't think that scale mechanism has been developed yet for that, but I think folks like Arka and what you guys are doing, I mean, I think it's commendable, and I think it's important because I think the reality is the software economy in India is not large enough to support many billion-dollar ARR companies, but I think the global market is.
So yeah, I mean, so when we look at all the challenges, right, and the role or the everyday life of a founder or the founding teams, there are tens of things that they need to do. There are challenges in each one of them, and what we strive to do is to make each one of them 10% easier. And this compounding effect, right? You do 10% improvements on 10 things, suddenly you have a 2.5 x advantage. Right. So that's kind of what we strive for, to make our jobs of our founders 10% easier across 10 different things. And this we do it in a very in a way where we are kind of really partnering with them, right, on their journey across every stage, so that's kind of what we strive to do. But this has been a very engaging conversation, Amar. Thank you for making time and speaking to us and sharing your journey. So appreciate your thoughts, and thank you for your time today. Looking forward to
thanks for having me. Appreciate it, and good luck to everyone out there.
All right, and also good luck on your new journey.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.